they argue that AI will become so much more intelligent than humans and think so differently that it could never explain how it reaches its conclusions to people, which envisions a future of computer says no, computer says yes, computer issues it, and you can't question it, it can't explain itself. We must trust that it's, in a kind of a religious way, that it's so much smarter than anything else. So if it says, Nuki ran, for example, and then they get in trouble for it or something, they'll be like, well, it was the computer and it's so much more intelligent than us humans. That's basically a way for them to get away with whatever they want. Just be like, well, actually the super intelligent artificial general intelligence that's smarter than God himself told us to do it, and we can't question that now, can we?
Over the past few years, popular investigative journalists and writers like Whitney Webb have had a major warning for humans. Humanity is sleepwalking into a dangerous future, blindly handing over control to artificial intelligence without fully grasping the consequences. Our brains, the most complex and powerful tool we possess, are being systematically undermined. Capable of storing 2.5 million gigabytes of memory, solving problems, and expressing emotions, the human brain thrives on use. But what happens when we stop using it? Like any muscle, it deteriorates. By outsourcing critical thinking, memory, and problem-solving to AI, we risk creating a population of mentally passive, dependent individuals. This isn't a theory. It's already happening. The consequences are catastrophic. Diminished mental acuity, weakened memory, shorter attention spans, and declining creativity are just the beginning. A society that relinquishes its cognitive power to machines becomes a society of followers, unable to innovate or resist. The result? A class of mentally subdued individuals ripe for manipulation. But this is just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to the many dangers of artificial intelligence. In a recent interview with the Dore show, Whitney exposes something even more chilling and terrifying. Our leaders being able to use artificial intelligence to achieve any objective, however dastardly, and conveniently avoid reproach by blaming the machines for their mistakes. It's already been established that our elected leaders are joined at the hip with the global elites, the World Economic Forum elites that want to take everything from you and put themselves in charge of every aspect of your lives. Whitney warns that artificial intelligence is how they quickly achieve their aims. Imagine what happens when they use it to push their own agendas, shape narratives, influence beliefs, and consolidate wealth and power. That's the future humanity faces if we continue to be led on by the official narrative. As we bring you clips from Whitney's interview, please take a little time to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on post notifications for more videos like this. Thanks for the support, and enjoy the video.
I do want to point out really quick, so I think DOGE, the Department of Government Efficiency, is really a Trojan horse for putting as much of government in the hands of AI as possible. And I think when you do that, that doesn't necessarily mean smaller government, right? Perhaps less humans in the workforce, but having like AI run all these different departments and programs and whatever doesn't necessarily mean the government is shrinking. It can mean the government human workforce is shrinking, but it's not necessarily the same thing. So we'll have to pay close attention to how that develops over time, because I suspect someone like Elon Musk, for example, who obviously has positioned himself to have undue power, considering that no one voted for him, is a big proponent of carbon taxes and carbon markets and a lot of stuff that conservatives and libertarians certainly don't like, and certainly would be an expansion of government. You're creating a whole new market, essentially, that civilians and corporations alike would have to play in order to meet, those quotas or however they choose to set it up. And I think ultimately it's very, very problematic putting AI in charge of government. It's actually something that Eric Schmidt and Henry Kissinger cheered on in their book, The Age of AI, Our Human Future, a very misleading title. It's about the post-human future that they envision. And basically, the way they sort of describe it, and I would recommend people read the book for themselves, but I sort of, my interpretation of it is that it's the ultimate kind of Wizard of Oz cover for the government to get away with whatever it wants. And honestly, like Henry Kissinger's wet dream. No wonder he was so excited about AI, because essentially, you can claim that, they argue that AI will become so much more intelligent than humans and think so differently that it could never explain how it reaches its conclusions to people, which envisions a future of computer says no, computer says yes, computer issues it, and you can't question it, it can't explain itself. We must trust that it's, in a kind of a religious way, that it's so much smarter than anything else. So if it says, Nuki ran, for example, and then they get in trouble for it or something, they'll be like, well, it was the computer and it's so much more intelligent than us humans. That's basically a way for them to get away with whatever they want. Just be like, well, actually the super intelligent artificial general intelligence that's smarter than God himself told us to do it, and we can't question that now, can we? That's basically sort of the setup. And, hopefully that's not the same thing Elon Musk and Ramaswamy have in mind, but I don't know. The lines between Eric Schmidt world and Peter Thiel-verse world are actually pretty thin. They're both on the steering committee of the Bilderberg Conference, and they agree on a lot more than they don't. They're both very closely aligned with the Department of Defense. As it comes to AI, Eric Schmidt basically wrote the game plan for how national security would use AI as head of the National Security Commission on Artificial Intelligence a few years ago. And of course, Peter Thiel, through many of his companies and the company he backs, is a major military contractor with a lot of ties to the national security state. And of course, not just the Department of Defense in Thiel's case, but also the CIA. And, they're really not that different in the end of the day. I think their sales pitches are different and how they frame stuff is different. So this particular camp that sort of claimed that they're the Silicon Valley libertarians are cloaking themselves in a lot of words like innovation, efficiency, and all of this stuff. But the problem is, AI as an industry is very overhyped. So for example, you could have a company say, like one company I wrote about during COVID-19 is an Israeli company called Diagnostic Robotics. And so they were picked by the Rhode Island governor at the time, who later became Biden's commerce secretary, to basically predict COVID outbreaks before they happen in Rhode Island. And they said themselves that their algorithm was roughly like 75% accurate, but that's like, the company's opinion. That wasn't independently vetted or anything. So it's probably closer to 60 or 50%, like a coin toss. So is it really more efficient to put an algorithm like that in charge of deciding public health policy, or if a particular community is locked down and its economic activity halted or something like that? That's just one example. Obviously AI is being applied to every sector, but there's been a lot of grift in this particular field. And it's also happened with, a former DARPA director had sort of a defense tech company. Her name's Regina Dugan when Obama was in power. And they got basically outed for having that. I think it was for detecting IEDs or the probability of them or something. I forget exactly what it was about, but it was found to literally be like a fraudulent algorithm. It was no better than a coin toss, and nothing happened to her. So this type of stuff happens in government all the time. And just because Elon Musk and Ramaswamy are at the helm of it doesn't mean that's going to happen. Specifically, when you look at Vivek Ramaswamy's, track record in pharma world of pump and dumps and things like that, this type of waste can still happen even if the government workforce is smaller. So it'll be interesting to see exactly what those policies are. But it's important to note that those people at Doge, and also, David Sachs is the AI crypto czar, who's also part of the PayPal mafia. None of them, as far as I know, have to divest from their investment interests.
In addition to her warning about artificial intelligence, Whitney also exposes chilling plans by the global elites to co-opt Bitcoin and crypto to further their less than palatable agendas for us all. According to Whitney, we are witnessing the birth of a new international monetary system, one that will redefine the way humanity lives, and not for the better. She adds that this system, built entirely on blockchain technology, isn't about innovation or efficiency. It's about surveillance, control, and censorship at a scale we've never seen before. This isn't a wild theory. Global elites and members of the World Economic Forum, like French President Emmanuel Macron and Mark Carney, the former governor of the Bank of England and the UN's Special Envoy for Climate Action and Finance, have openly laid out their vision. Carney himself described the three pillars of the so-called New World Order: digital IDs, central bank digital currencies, CBDCs, and environmental, social, and governance, ESG standards. Together, these mechanisms will create a system where every move you make, every dollar you spend, and every decision you take can be monitored, judged, and controlled. During her interview with The Jimmy Dore Show, Whitney exposes some of the players behind this agenda. She explains how governments worldwide are aligning themselves with this vision, proudly championed by the ultra-wealthy and powerful. Figures like Larry Fink, CEO of BlackRock, are at the forefront. Here are more clips from the video.
It's really a two-part system, so it involves sort of yoking the dollar in a de facto way to Bitcoin, and then basically boosting the price of Bitcoin through the roof, essentially, as a way to sort of allow the U.S. government to debt pardon itself. And one of the reasons, well, I don't want to get too far ahead of myself, so I'll come back to that later. But basically, we've had so many wealth transfers in this country. We're at the point where the robber barons, the elite bankers, whatever you want to call them, have basically stolen everything. So now that they have everything, they want to move to deflationary money. And so the only problem they have left the only hurdle left to cross, right, is sort of this extreme U.S. government debt crisis that is about to be upon the United States and essentially been admitted by big-time congressmen like Paul Ryan very recently. And one of the ways Paul Ryan pitched getting out of that problem was starting to regulate dollar stablecoins, many of which have now surpassed several nation states as the biggest holders of U.S. treasuries or, U.S. government debt in the world, right? So you have like the biggest dollar stablecoin like Tether now holding, more treasuries than, well, I forget exactly where it is in the ranking, but it's bigger than Germany and some other countries that have significant amounts of reserves. Unfortunately, I don't have the figures at the top of my head right now, but it's a very easy search to find, those exact numbers. But it's very significant and being talked about pretty widely. So stablecoins are becoming a way for the U.S. government to service its debt, and this is sort of being done throughout Latin America, especially where you have sort of this de facto, what I would call sort of covert dollarization happening. So like you wreck an economy like Argentina via the IMF, for example, which the U.S. military and documents published by WikiLeaks several years ago was referred to as a financial weapon of U.S. empire, right? So if you like wreck an economy and you destroy their currency, and then people flock to Tether or USDC or some other, because they can't get their hand on physical dollars. They can get their hand on virtual dollars. And that's happening in a big way in a lot of these economies that have become increasingly destabilized, arguably on purpose, by the US power structure. And then you have them becoming de facto dollarized as opposed to sort of formal dollarization, which took place decades ago in places like Ecuador, El Salvador, where those countries essentially lose a significant amount of their financial sovereignty because they're sort of at the whim of the Federal Reserve, which they have zero control over, right?
So you're saying in a case like that, all right, so their currency's been destroyed partly through IMF policy or entirely. So
or World Bank or the multilateral development banking system among, there's these vulture capitalist figures that have been a big issue in Argentina as well. Most of them are American, like Paul Singer, for example, is probably one of the most notorious. BlackRock is also one. Javier Milei in Argentina has been making deals with them. Yeah, he doesn't say afuera to BlackRock. Or JP Morgan or, plenty of other, or Silicon Valley. He's like, no, take over our government, please. It's kind of funny. He's like, yeah, like libertarians cheer him on because he's like, I'm going to get rid of the Ministry of Education. It's wasteful. And, maybe it is. I don't know. I'm not an expert on waste and, the Ministry of Education in Argentina, but he's pitched replacing it with Facebook's AI to train everyone in, all the young people in Argentina for the future of work. work, that doesn't sound like a great alternative.
Whitney has no problem with Bitcoin or its underlying technology. She recognizes the leading digital currency as a revolutionary concept and a liberating force designed to emancipate people from the clutches of governments and central banks. Her problem is with those trying to co-opt it to fit their agendas. She is also particularly skeptical of stablecoins like Tether and warns that the global banking cabal will push the adoption of these centralized cryptocurrencies as CBDCs globally. In one tweet, she issues some specific warnings about Tether and its close relationship with intelligence agencies. The tweet reads, "Tether was intimately involved in the FTX scandal, has the FBI Secret Service on its platform to surveil its users, openly states its main goal is to help spread dollar hegemony globally, and seizes people's USDT whenever the Treasury's OFAC puts them on their naughty list. It is not freedom money. It is the newest phase of the US dollar debt slavery system and easily acts as a de facto CBDC in terms of its threats to financial liberty. It is a private sector digital currency, but the US NatSec states' mass surveillance efforts have always been public-private partnerships. Why would the CBDC effort be any different?" Another tweet in which she warns about the dangers of artificial intelligence reads, "The Kissinger, Eric Schmidt book on artificial intelligence basically states that the real promise of AI, from their perspective, is as a tool of perception manipulation, that eventually, people will not be able to interpret or perceive reality without the help of an AI via cognitive diminishment and learned helplessness. For that to happen, online reality must become so unbelievable that real people can no longer distinguish real from fake in the virtual realm, so they can then become dependent on certain algorithms to tell them what is real. Please realize that we are in a war against the elites over human perception and that social media is a major battleground in that war. Hold on to your critical thinking and skepticism and never surrender it." Do you agree that artificial intelligence poses a lot of dangers to humans, especially in the hands of our megalomaniac leaders and elites? Whitney has made a lot of important points in her interviews and tweets. Please share your thoughts, comments, and observations in the comments section below. If you liked this video and want more like it, please give it a thumbs up, share it with others, and subscribe to the channel. You can also activate the notifications bell to get instantly notified whenever we upload a video. Thanks for watching.